Thanks for joining us today. I'm Elliot Custodio. This is GT Joey, Joe Limongelli, and Todd Warren. Today's topic of conversation is they don't make it like they used to. What do you guys think about that?
I think they don't make them like they used to. And that's good and bad and everywhere in between. Lots of ways. A lot of people say, everything was all steel and now everything is plastic and the plastic falls apart. It's actually not the case.
I feel like a lot of people don't understand the value of saving weight, as one example, right? So you look at cars from pick a period, 50s-ish, fore and after that.
Yeah.
Heavy metal vehicles, they don't make them like they used to. You used to be able to tap on a fender and feel the quality, or at least your perceived quality. The truth of the matter is you had very poor gas mileage. It was a harder vehicle to stop, but a lot of people don't understand weight and how a lot of weight was saved. And as a result, we were able to add more weight in other things, luxuries and whatnot, and also the saved weight, helped with gas mileage and those other things. Am I going down the right path here? Do you guys agree?
I think that was true for a lot of years, and now, because we have all this additional stuff in cars that didn't exist in the 50s and all these other things that people want now that didn't exist then, today's cars are heavier than they were in the 50s. You look at a 50s car and it's huge and has all the chrome on it that you'd think would weigh 8 million pounds.
Yeah.
Right? And you look at what they weigh, and the biggest, heaviest cars in the 50s are like 4,500 pounds. And now, small cars can be 4,500 pounds if they're carrying battery packs. Kind of mid-sized cars are 3,500 to 4,500 pounds because they have so many amenities and so many electronics. But they're also full of safety tech that a lot of people dismiss until they actually have a crash and they don't get hurt, and they would have gotten hurt before.
Right.
So lots of pros and cons.
Yeah.
Yeah, this discussion's been going on a long time, guys. Look, if you take a car even 20, 30 years ago, okay, and you look at the design, it was basically a design before function, okay? Now it's total function. Between what goes on in the world with liability and crash testing and emissions, if we really look at what goes on, yes, some of the designs are wild today. Do they look as beautiful as a 1950 whatever Ferrari? No, they're way off the mark, okay? But your windshield pillars were about an inch wide, okay?
That's true.
There was no corner airbags, side airbags, front airbags, and all that. But like Todd was saying, if you happen to get in an accident with a 92-year-old, what happens, okay? She walks out of it today. The old days from the 50s, 60s, 70s when we were kids, remember before the seatbelt? That was your seatbelt.
That was my mother. My mother did that every day.
Yeah.
Your mother put your arm, your father put your arm. That's in between the cigarette with the windows closed, okay?
Right.
With the AM radio screaming with drum brakes. And if you hit a puddle of water, he was pumping the pedal to get the water out of the drum brakes. So look, they don't make them like they used to. There's obviously some gorgeous designs back in the day, okay? But if you look at today's technology and you don't realize it, most of you guys go on a lot of these sites where you have like a bring a trailer or an eBay. Oh, I've got to have this car I had in high school, right?
Right, relive the dream.
And you relive the dream, right, Todd? We've all gone down this road, right?
Absolutely.
And what happens? We get a guy my age. I'm the oldest out of you three by a week, okay? They buy the original Mustang they had in high school. My original 1969 Oldsmobile, okay? Cool car. They drive it for a week and get rid of it. Well, what happened? My back hurts, my leg hurts, I can't see. No, those headlights weren't halogen in 1969. You don't have anti-lock brakes.
And your eyes were much different back in
You don't have
1969.
electric steering.
Yeah.
And you don't have lane keeping and assist. It's a different time.
It was
Now,
hard work.
It's a lot of work. Now, can you get the old days of new cars? Yeah. If you buy a new Ferrari, if you buy a McLaren 720S, but that's not for the masses. That's for the 1%. And that's where there's a trade-off. And I think, especially in the early 2000s, when everybody was going retro, it all started with the Volkswagen, bringing back the Bug, right?
Yeah.
Then you had BMW, bringing back the Mini Cooper. I bought that
Ford T-Bird, the retro
T-Bird,
Mustang.
the Ford GT that we see on the table.
Yep.
Modern amenities, old design. Now, a lot of that did change after 07 when they changed the crash testing again. And that's why a lot of people today really drive SUVs. You know,
Yeah.
you just can't You can't use those tolerances anymore. It just won't pass.
Well, even the distance of the hood relative to where the engine is, right? You've got a lot more air cushion there now
That's right.
for
The
pedestrian impact.
Yep.
That's right.
Or taking the leaper off a Jaguar hood
That's right.
as to not impale all those people that got impaled. I don't know. Did that ever happen?
I don't know that it ever happened.
Okay.
The loss of the knockoff ears on wire wheels.
Right.
That was 1968.
And
How,
really,
how many people really got hurt by the spinning by the spinners?
Right.
Right. That spinner's gonna
Only
come
emotionally.
and kill you. Right. Well, look, those were the Ralph Nader years. The only car left that I know of that's produced, mass production to a degree, is Rolls Royce. You can still have the Flying Lady, but it's a $35,000 mechanism that if you try and grab it, it would drop down. Or
Right. But well, even before that, it was spring loaded.
it's
right?
spring-loaded,
Right. You weren't gonna hurt anybody.
Right.
Yep.
But
the
it got to a
Mercedes,
point
the
where it
Mercedes
The
Stars.
Trident. Yeah.
Mercedes Star had to do the same. So, look, things have changed. There are a lot of pluses. I mean, I get in my brand new pickup truck, nameless, okay, because they're all great if it's an American pickup truck. I've got a Hemi V8, I've got an 8-speed, and I make it to Florida, 975 miles in a tank and a half. Where we remember the days my parents took us down in a Grand Marquis or an LTD station wagon. You had to fill up every 3-4 hours.
Yeah.
And you were stopping 6, 7, 8 times just to get there on leaded gasoline with the windows closed and smoking cigarettes.
I do remember those days, absolutely. We
Yeah,
used to drive to
and you're still
Florida
here.
all the time. Fortunately, my family, nobody smoked, but the rest of it is very true.
Yeah. Look, there are some cool things, like we said, the BMWs, and what it does do with the Mini Coopers and all that. And what's the other brands like the new Kias and stuff? They're coming out with crazy designs. This is where you're going to have the younger people today stay in the automobile hobby.
Well, a Mini Cooper's a great example.
Right.
There are going to be younger folks that don't know the original Mini.
Right.
Right. And this is the gateway drug to a classic Mini.
Right. The BMW, the Z3, right?
Yeah.
The Miata. The Miata is a cult, and it's a great cult.
Yeah.
It's a bulletproof, modern style MG.
Well, and that is a gateway car if you want to get into like SCCA racing and all that kind of stuff.
That's
You want to
Absolutely.
start racing. How do
Absolutely.
you not pick up an NA Miata?
Yep.
Right.
Spec Miata is a huge thing unto itself.
My son now, okay, it was 10 years ago, he was a teenager. He picked up a Miata with 195,000 miles for $500. This is 10 years ago, not 35 years ago. He swapped out the clutch. It was like $65. It was 6 bolts. Got underneath it, swapped it out. He drove the car for a year till it fell apart.
Right.
But that was like us in the 70s.
And the
80s.
aftermarket support is out of control
Oh,
for cars like
yep.
that. It's
And
awesome.
it's fun.
And never
Yeah.
mind that there was no Miata 35 years ago. We'll let that slide.
No, wait, the first year Miata.
He was 90, right?
It was around 9. I think the first
think
year
it was
1990.
1990?
I think
It
it
was
was
90, yeah.
1990.
That's 33 years ago.
That's right. It's not 35.
Young man.
Uh-huh.
Almost 35 years.
So, all right, another thought on they don't make it like they used to
Yeah.
is the ability is relative because everyone's got different skills, but the ability to work on your own car,
Right.
right? You look at using the Mustang as an example, a 60s Mustang,
Right.
especially if you were from that era.
Right.
You either remember how to do it or you think you remember how to
Right.
do it, but you had this very basic, you didn't have a basic view as much as your view was that this was basic, right? You could open up the hood, see the ground, which is
Right.
very difficult.
Yep.
You could drop, I was going to say a 10 millimeter, but you drop a half-inch socket working on a Mustang and it's going to hit the ground, right? That doesn't happen anymore. It's chock full of stuff. And of course, all the computers.
Yeah.
So where are we with that? Like, if you want, I can kind of argue both sides of that
Yeah.
because I'm going to say the older guy, but what I mean by that is the individual that was around when that car was new and that's why they aspire to own it again.
Right.
That person is at an age where a station in their life where they don't have to work on it if they don't want to, right? If they have the disposable income to buy that classic car that they could, in theory, work on because it's basic,
Right.
they don't have to work on it because
Right.
they've gotten to where they've gotten, where they're buying toys like
Yep.
that. That's a good example to me if they don't make it like they used to. If I want that experience of turning wrenches, it's not the same if I want to do it on my modern daily driver.
Not even close, because most of the issues are electronic.
It's plug and play.
Can you fix it?
Right.
Yeah.
Things get replaced now instead of getting fixed.
plugged in.
Very few people actually repair things anymore.
Good point.
Yeah, it's definitely a generational thing. Look, if you were born in the 60s, I'll say 50s, 60s, 70s, it was still a mechanical unit.
Yeah.
Todd's dad has many cars from the 20s, 30s, 40s, okay? That's way past us, but we all respect it here, okay? They get it, whether it's air-cooled, whether it was a wooden chassis, wooden wheels, they're locked in a time. We're the three of us at this table, we're the last generation of hands-on mechanical. Todd, yourself, you have Aston Martins, me, I had the McLaren, we got everything else under the sun, Ferrari. This is all they need is a laptop. The modern mechanic, if they're in their 20s and 30s, they're really not mechanics, they call them, they're technicians, because they're using tech and plug it in.
Yeah.
Where we used to go, wait a minute, it's starting to load up on plugs a little bit. I got to adjust the jets on the carburetor or adjust the air, take off the air cleaner. Those days are gone. It's ding, 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 ding. And I'm bringing this up for a reason because there's such a drastic difference. Look, when that McLaren came in by boat overseas, okay, I couldn't get delivery of the car. I wanted to do like old days because I finally got to the point I was able to afford that car. When the car came into shore, I called Todd. I wanted to go down there and take pictures when it came off the boat because it was number 3 of the McLaren 720S's, which is a rocket.
Wow.
Okay? I called Simon. Joe, you can't do it because of copyrights and this, that. Copyrights? I bought the car. You don't understand. When the car came off the boat, it had a program in it. So A, you couldn't steal it, and B, you couldn't monkey around with the regulations for emissions. Every country's different, okay? The car had a sleeper mode that you could turn it on, hit all the buttons and all this other stuff. And it would make it to the truck, and then the truck straight to the garage. Quarter of a mile, whatever, 500 feet.
Yeah.
Then, and I called Todd when it came in, I couldn't believe it. I couldn't take delivery of the car. The car was then plugged in at the dealer for 3 days, downloading all the programs in the computer, like when you buy a new computer.
You bought a locked iPhone. That's effectively what you did.
Believe me, it was a locked iPhone. Believe me, after 6 months, I couldn't take it anymore. But the wind-up was, it programmed state emissions, the country's emissions, because Canada was different, South America was different.
Yeah.
It's 2.5 days of downloading, and then it was a whole procedure when I bought the car and all the. And that is old technology. That's 5 years ago.
Yeah, yeah.
Now they're talking about eye technology and everything else and programming you to the car and how you drive. And it's just, that guy's not going to sit underneath the hood with a wrench.
No.
They just take the computer, plug it into the brain, where there used to be no ECUs, okay? Now there's 4 to 6.
Right.
Okay? And each one's talking, some of them are actually fighting each other for the programs, and that's what's starting to happen.
But even having multiple ODB2 ports.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't know that was a thing until I realized I had a
yeah.
car where that was a thing.
Yeah.
Oh, no, this is a big, big thing.
Yeah.
And that's, look, that's the future. You could see our kids, they don't have the patience we did. They don't have the time we did. We went over this a while back. Every week when I came home from originally school and then work, Friday night, what would you do with your car? Because it was your everything. You'd wash the car. Saturday, you'd vacuum out everything. Sunday, you'd wax it and we'd be ready for another week.
Yeah.
I don't remember the last time I washed, waxed, and vacuumed the car other than hiring 3 people to do it nowadays. Okay?
I did it last weekend.
I still enjoy doing it myself, but
Right, but I mean, do you do it every week?
No.
Like the old days? Okay? You just don't do it. You don't have
well, life gets in the way,
Well,
right? Like the passion's no less, but
I know.
life gets in the way. Yeah.
And that's like what this topic is about.
Yeah.
It's not like it used to be.
What I find disappointing is and I don't want to generalize this, especially as it pertains to generations of people.
Yeah.
Right? Younger people.
And there's definitely younger people that want to do
they're-
old cars.
Totally.
It's 1%.
Totally.
It's not 90%, but it is 1%.
What kills me, because they're such beautiful pieces of art,
Yeah.
are like the cars that your dad has collected over time, and 20s, 30s vehicles.
Yeah.
And I'm just as much to blame. I have no interest in owning one.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
You appreciate it.
I appreciate it. I appreciate the art. I appreciate the ingenuity because of the time that was state of the art. The historic value of that.
Yeah. And technology advanced very, very quickly
It did.
at the time.
Yeah.
And it's primitive now. But I completely agree with you. I grew up with that stuff. I was fortunate that my father was very much into teens, 20s, and 30s cars. I love them, and that is increasingly rare, seemingly. You see it in the values, you see it in the attendance at the shows.
Yeah.
There are fewer and fewer 20s and 30s cars at the shows now, except the really big ones. But they're being supplanted largely by 40s, well, even not even 40s, but 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s cars. An antique, according to the Antique Automobile Club of America, is 25 years old. So that's 1998. It's hard for me to get my head around the notion.
That's not far.
Exactly.
That's
hard,
not far
hard
at
for me
all.
to get around my head around the notion that a 1998 car is a quote-unquote antique.
Right.
Doesn't seem like it to me.
Right.
But they are gorgeous. They are
Yeah.
works of art in design, even before there was styling, and then that
Right.
started in the late 20s, early 30s. You look at some of the spectacular things from the coach builders in the 30s, in the Art Deco era, like Fagoni-Falaski and such things.
Even
There's-
early in the United
there's
States.
Absolutely. Look at a 41 Cadillac 60 Special sedan. That was
I
one
still
of the
want a
first
coffin nose
designed.
cord. I think that's
They're
gorgeous.
fantastic.
I don't know what I would do with it,
Right.
and it probably wouldn't fit in my garage.
Well,
I think it
But-
would.
Maybe
I think
it
it
would.
would. And that's Gordon.
Yeah.
That's Gordon Bierig.
Right.
He's an absolute master.
Gorgeous car.
and again, those guys, well, we call them World War II guys, okay? They're before the war and during the war and after the war. And they stretched out to the 60s. That was about it. And even, we were talking about this the other day again, just take and it doesn't have to be that old. And that's why you're going to get some younger people. Not a lot.
Yeah.
Take a 63 Stingray with Harley Earl, right? It has that split window.
Yep.
Zora Duntov hated it. It's a gimmick. It's an American thing. We got to be Porsche.
And I heard people were cutting them out in 64 to make the 63 look like it's 64.
My cousin had a 64, wouldn't buy a 63 and bought it new.
Yeah.
Okay? And it was $2,400 coupe. But again, if you look at it now, it's 55 years later.
Yeah.
Now, in 1970, say we're kids, 70 something, and you go back 55 years, oh my God, this thing's a wagon with a horse in front of it.
Right.
But from 55 years now backwards, okay, you see those designs like the split down the window, and yeah, it's got the dummy grills on the front hood. That's kind of corny, but it's designed first before function.
Yeah.
But everybody knows this. A kid knows what a 63 split window is today in 2023.
Okay, so I have an idea. Or a thought. I feel like a lot of what's helping get younger folks, frankly everybody, back into cars, especially the older cars, is all the content that's available on YouTube.
Oh, I
It's right. It's exposing people to
100%.
cars they've never heard of, and it's also exposing them to how to work on those cars, what to look for, so on and so forth. I'm going to throw out there potentially a golden idea because I haven't seen anyone do this. But if you get younger YouTubers to do a series on the teens, 20s, 30s cars,
Right.
buying them, doing something with them. I guess if you were going down the hot rod route,
Right.
that stuff exists. But I'm talking about keeping the car pure and appreciating it for what it was at the time. I don't know if anyone would really care about that, but if they did, and you had
Right.
some younger people get into it,
Right.
it would make it cool. And
That's-
I don't know. I'd love to see something like that just for the sake of the appreciation.
I agree.
Yeah. It's an interesting.
ahead.
It's an interesting idea. In part because we have all these. There's a resto mod trend, but there's also a big movement away from over restoration and a focus on originality.
It's only original ones.
It's only original ones, which I think makes a lot of sense, and I am definitely an originality fan. But it can also go too far. So you have these. You kind of have these extremes.
If you're honoring it and safety becomes a concern, as an example.
Sometimes, yeah, something is original and it's completely and totally shot and barely hanging together, or maybe not even hanging together. But you can't touch that because it's
driving
original.
on the road.
There's a point at which it has gone too far.
You're talking survivor type cars, right?
I think there's a point at
Rotted
which it
out
goes too
floors,
far.
but it's still original. Yeah,
Right,
obviously.
exactly. And then you have the resto mod trend on the other side, which is
Yeah.
really becoming very, very prolific. You have things like Singer Porsches,
Yeah.
which are absolutely spectacular.
Yeah.
And then you have guys dropping, GM crate engines into just about everything.
Right.
How often do you hear or see on a forum, she put an LS in that? It's all over the place.
Right.
Well, that's perfect for they don't make them like they used to, right? Now you've got guys and gals, you've got people with the appreciation of the design because they don't make that design like they used to.
Right.
But everything underneath that design is modern and the car
Right.
is more tolerable,
Yep.
if you
And
will.
goes to what you were saying earlier about people getting old cars because they love the way they look, getting them and not liking them because they're hard. They're hard work. They're hard to drive.
Right. Listen to me. You brought up an interesting idea because engineering is always going to be around. You need engineering for everything in the world. Okay. If you take young college grads or junior high, high school kids, they're interested in engineering, and you gave them a project. We'll take a 20s, 30s, 40s car, so you know they're limited to that time, and try and develop that car into something that you'd want to drive today and or upgrade it. Because I'm going to tell you something that doesn't exist, and this is why we have a shortage in the workforce labor, especially in these kind of markets, okay? When I was in high school, obviously I loved cars. I loved cars the minute I was born, okay? So that's the 60s, everything's cars, cars,
Yeah.
okay? Remember, you only had one TV with 5 channels and a car. That's your only 2 things you had, right, Todd? You
Lot-
were almost there.
A lot of truth in that.
You were almost there. But summers, weekends, General Motors, AC Delco used to have for teenagers, college grads. If you're interested, if you want to go into this field, I used to go to Terrytown for the summer. 3-4 weeks, and they would train you on intake, compression, power, exhaust, okay, how an internal combustion engine worked at that time. And then these are the new cars that are going to be out in the next 3 to 5 years. At that time was the Oldsmobile Omega going into the 80s, and the Cadillac Cimarron, and the 468. They were all total disasters. But at that time, it was, oh my God, I can't believe what we're getting into, okay? And it's very primitive stuff. But that's why we're still here today and why we still have cars.
Yeah.
Because you can relate as the times change. But that idea you had really would be great for young people, okay? I know at the Indy every year they do the solar test. Every school, they bring the
Get them
top
to
5 or
compete.
10.
Yeah,
They compete.
yeah.
They build a solar battery running car, and then who wins, who's the fastest, and all that stuff, and gets the one. And they get into that. And it started with the old calculators, you know, with the little light thing, and then they make bands of it and make the car able to move. And now with the technology today, it's night and day. But that's a great idea. That's a great idea.
I mean, whenever you have whoever's young at the time embrace something,
Right.
it typically becomes cool, right?
Right.
The minute the
Yep.
old guys are into it, it's not really that cool.
Right.
But I don't know. I'd like to see that.
It's an interesting
Yeah.
idea, and I wonder how the young kid would take to those older cars, even modifying them. Because if you go to an event, most of the old hot rods, like the rods that are based on the 20s and 30s cars, those are usually owned by old guys,
Yeah.
older than us even.
Yeah. Yeah. And to your point about the engineering, understanding the physics of things and how things work, there's nothing like an older car to get that sort of education.
Absolutely.
We just came from the Indy 500s, 30 years that went in a row, okay, for, minus the COVID year, okay? And they showed Jim Clark's Lotus. Now, when I was a kid, Jim Clark's Lotus is the be-all, end-all, okay? They actually showed you, right, when the car would flip and crash, they had these test films back in the day. We're kids, like, oh my God, this is unbelievable. So they would purposely roll the car, right? It would roll and roll and roll at 100, and not one screw or body panel would come off. Nothing would come off. You go, wow, they could put it back on the track. Yeah, they didn't understand back then. The G-force was all taken care of by the guy,
Right.
and then he'd be dead. He'd be not even bones. He would be just dissolved in the car, which now when you see cars, whether it's a drivable car, race car, it all shatters and dissolves. Why? Because of the technology, the inertia,
The energy has to go
G-force.
somewhere, and it should
Yeah.
be a human body.
So it's still a car.
Yeah.
They could still
Yeah.
get in a crash, but what's the difference? We've learned over the last 50 years that you have to disperse it so it doesn't get to you inside the cradle of the car.
Yeah.
So again, do they make them like they used to in that way? No, not at all. But that's something for the better.
But you know what? That evolution came from being involved with the before in order to get to
Sure.
the after, right? So I say that because sometimes you don't know what you don't know, And
Right.
if somebody was born, again, not making this about age, but if somebody was born when everything was electronic,
Yeah.
you have a different perspective of how you troubleshoot something like that,
Right.
right?
Have a different perspective on a lot of things.
Right. So my generation is, from what I hear, split down the middle. You either get computers, or you have no idea how to deal with a computer.
Right.
And that's weird to me, but it is what it is. And sometimes you just don't know what you don't know. If they're not exposed to the mechanical aspects of doing stuff, and they only know if I reprogram this that it's supposed to do X, Y, Z.
Right.
That kind of evolution gets squashed, doesn't it?
Right.
Right.
There's so much of that. You talk about how things work. You can look under the hood of an old car and you can see the various parts, and you can identify what does what. You look under the hood of a modern car and you basically see another hood, right? Everything has an engine cover.
Yeah.
There's nothing to see,
Right.
which to somebody like me is a massive disappointment. But nobody is going to do that. How many people actually open hoods anymore? But if you do, there's really just another hood. So it's not interesting, other than with certain exotics and whatever else.
Or even certain exotics, you can't even open up the hood anymore, right? You have no choice.
Modern
but
911s,
to bring it to get
modern
serviced.
911s, you open the hood, there's no engine to see. It's just reservoir.
Sealed.
It's just reservoir caps. But as an indication of how people now have seen different things and haven't seen a lot of things, and about how things work, my daughter, who is now 19, 5, 6, 7 years ago, somewhere around there, she and my son, we were in the car, we pulled up next to somebody, and the guy in the next car goes like this, makes this motion. And I put down the window. So later my kids say, why do people go like this when they're wanting you to put down the window? Because they have never seen a manually cranked window. All they've seen is electric windows.
Yeah, what's also interesting? Ownership is evolving, and I'm going to save this for us as a topic for a different episode. But the idea that there are cars that you cannot get into the hood of, you have to take it to the dealership to
Yep.
get it serviced.
Right.
When you think beyond the first owner, how does that affect resale? You've got cars, especially a lot of supercars, where the values drop like a stone,
Right.
and they're quote unquote good deals to buy. And we can always talk about there's a difference between being able to afford buying the car or afford owning the car. Right?
Absolutely.
That guarantees that the ownership component is very expensive and very narrow in scope. I have to bring it to the dealership. Again, we'll save this for another topic, but talking about ownership changing to almost a subscription model versus an ownership model is a very interesting concept based on it ain't like it used to be. Things aren't like they used to be, but another topic for another day. But in the meantime, thank you for joining us. I hope you found this fun. If you did, hit like and subscribe below, and we'll see you in the next episode. Thank you.
Thank you.